It was a difficult time. The people who were supposed to care for me, they were my enemies. I've carried that for 60 years.
When I was 13, I believed life should feel safe, warm, and full of love. I thought my home's walls were there to protect me, and that my parents were trustworthy. But that year, everything changed. It was the moment I realized that sometimes, those who should love you can also hurt you. I remember sitting on the porch, watching the neighborhood kids play and laugh. Their laughter floated through the summer air. For a moment, I wished I could join them, but something inside me felt heavy. I carried a secret weight that I couldn't name. My family wasn't like theirs. Behind our closed doors, things were darker, colder, and filled with shadows I didn't understand. At 13, I wasn't ready to experience betrayal. I had no idea how damaging silence could be. I was just a child trying to hold on to pieces of my dwindling innocence. Yet deep inside, something was changing. My heart was breaking, but without me realizing it, a small seed of strength was taking root. That year would shape my entire life. I didn't know it then, but it was just the start of a long journey filled with sadness, loneliness, and eventually, courage. One afternoon, I walked past the kitchen and heard my parents talking. At first, I thought it was just another argument that often filled our home. But then, I heard my name. The words that followed froze me. They weren't discussing me with love or pride. They saw me as a burden, a mistake they had to endure. My heart sank, and my chest tightened to the point that I could barely breathe. I pressed against the wall, too afraid to move but too broken to leave. Every sentence cut deeper. I wanted to cover my ears but I couldn't. It felt like my body had turned to stone. In that moment, something shattered inside me. The people I trusted most, the ones who were supposed to love me no matter what, showed me how they really saw me. From that day on, my home no longer felt like a home. The walls that should have provided comfort felt like a trap. The roof that was supposed to shelter me felt like a weight pressing down. I stopped seeing myself as a daughter. Instead, I felt like a stranger in my own family. The days that followed were quiet, but they were far from peaceful. At school, I smiled when people talked to me, but inside, I was drowning. I watched my classmates laugh with their parents during pickup, holding hands and skipping to their cars. I kept asking myself, why couldn't my life be like that? Why couldn't I be loved like them? At home, I avoided my parents as much as I could. I stayed in my room, drawing, reading, pretending to be busy. But no matter how much I tried to hide, the truth I had heard wouldn't leave me. The pain of betrayal was a wound that never healed. Loneliness wrapped around me like heavy blankets. I was surrounded by people, yet I felt completely alone. It was as if my voice didn't matter, as if I had become invisible in the one place where I should have felt the most seen. So at 13, I began to understand something that many adults take years to realize. The worst kind of loneliness isn't being alone. It's feeling surrounded by people who are supposed to love you but make you feel like you don't belong. The pain I carried wasn't always visible. There were no cuts or bruises for the world to see. But inside me, scars were forming deeper than any physical wound. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, and wondering if it was my fault. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe that's why my parents didn't want me. Every small mistake I made at home felt enormous, as if it confirmed what they thought of me. If I dropped a plate or forgot to finish a chore, I felt like it proved I was a burden. I learned to walk softly, to breathe quietly, to exist without making noise. I thought if I could be perfect, maybe they would see me differently. But no matter what I did, the love I needed never came. That's when I learned one of life's hardest lessons. Sometimes, the deepest wounds are the ones that no one else can see. They're the ones you carry inside your heart, in silence, every single day. Amid all that sadness, someone noticed me. She was an old woman who lived down the street. Her name was Mrs. Green, and she always sat on her porch in the evenings, humming gentle songs. One day as I walked by, she called to me. "Louise, you always look so sad, child. Come sit with me. At first, I didn't want to. I was used to keeping my pain hidden. But there was something kind in her voice, something I hadn't felt in a long time. So, I sat with her. She didn't ask many questions or push me to explain. She talked about her garden, her flowers, and sometimes gave me cookies she had baked. It may have seemed small, but to me, it meant everything. For those moments, I felt seen and cared for. Her kindness reminded me that not everyone was cruel. Even when my family turned their backs, there were still people capable of love. Mrs. Green didn't know it then, but she sparked the first hope I'd felt in years. At night, after spending time with Mrs. Green, I would look out my window and let my imagination carry me away. I dreamed of a life where I didn't have to be afraid, where love was unconditional, and where family meant warmth and safety. Sometimes, I pictured myself in a small home filled with laughter and peace. Other times, I dreamed of faraway places, of trains that could take me anywhere but here. My dreams became my escape, the only place I could feel free. In those moments, I didn't feel trapped or unwanted. I felt alive. And though I was still a child, my imagination gave me the strength to keep going. The dreams were fragile, like glass, but they were mine. They reminded me of something important. No matter how dark life felt, there was always the possibility of something better. I cried often, but never where anyone could see me. I hid my tears in the corners of my pillow at night. During the day, I smiled and nodded, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was breaking. Still, something strange was happening. With each tear I shed and every silent night I endured, I was becoming stronger. I didn't realize it then, but the sadness was carving out a strength in me that would carry me through my life. My silence wasn't a weakness. It was survival. My tears weren't shameful. They showed that I could feel deeply and still keep moving forward. I was just a girl, but I was already learning what it meant to endure. The hardest part of those years was pretending everything was normal. From the outside, my family looked fine. My parents smiled in front of neighbors, shook hands at church, and spoke politely around others. But behind closed doors, the truth was different. Their words cut deeper than any slap could. They didn't shout all the time, but when they did, it made me feel small, invisible, and unwanted. I kept my head down, moving through life like a shadow. I spoke softly, responded only when spoken to, and tried to stay out of the way. But no matter how quiet I became, the feeling of rejection followed me everywhere. It clung to me like a second skin. Yet amid all that, I began to notice small things that gave me strength. A kind word from a teacher who told me I was smart. A smile from a classmate who saved me a seat. Small, ordinary things that most kids might overlook. But for me, those were lifelines. Proof that I still mattered, even if my own parents couldn't see it. Those tiny sparks of kindness kept me going. As time passed, I became good at hiding my pain. People thought I was shy, maybe even quiet by nature. But the truth was, I learned that sharing too much could be risky. My heart was a locked box, and I held the key. But one day, that box almost burst open. It happened in school when we were asked to write about our families. The teacher wanted us to share what made our families special. I sat frozen at my desk. My pencil hovered above the paper, but no words came. The kids around me scribbled quickly, drawing hearts and smiling stick figures. I just stared at a blank page. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Finally, I wrote just one line: "My family taught me how strong I can be." The teacher read my paper and gave me a quiet nod. She didn't ask questions, but in that small gesture, I felt seen. It was the first time I subtly admitted that my pain was shaping me. I was still just a child, but I was already carrying an adult's weight. Some nights, I sat on the edge of my bed and whispered to myself, "You'll get out of here one day. You'll have a better life." I didn't know how or when, but holding on to that promise kept me from giving up. I knew I couldn't change my parents. I couldn't force them to love me the way I wanted. But I could change myself. I could take the pain they gave me and turn it into fuel. I could build a life where no one could ever make me feel unwanted again. It wasn't an easy promise to maintain. Some days I felt like giving up, letting the sadness swallow me. But deep inside, there was a small but steady fire that refused to go out. That fire carried me through the darkest nights. I was broken, but I was not destroyed. The breaking point came one night when I was 15. My parents were arguing again, but this time their anger spilled over onto me in a way I could no longer ignore. I remember standing in the kitchen, my hands trembling, as harsh words were thrown at me like stones. Something inside me cracked. I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I couldn't keep carrying a pain that wasn't mine to bear. That night, I sat in my room and cried until my pillow was soaked. When the tears finally stopped, I felt a strange calm. I looked in the mirror and for the first time, I told myself the truth: you deserve better than this. It was scary to think that because it felt so far away. But it was the first step toward taking my life back. Courage doesn't come all at once. For me, it came in small pieces. In the following weeks, I began to do little things differently. I walked with my head a bit higher at school. I spoke louder when teachers asked me questions. At home, I still stayed quiet, but inside, I was planning. I knew I couldn't stay in Riverdale forever. I needed to find a way out. So I started saving every coin I could find, pennies from the floor, dimes from change, even nickels I found in couch cushions. I hid them in a tin can under my bed. To anyone else, it was pocket change. To me, it was freedom. Every time I dropped a coin in that can, it made a soft clink, and that sound became music to me. It was hope. It showed me that one day, I would step away from the sadness and build a life of my own. By the time I turned 16, I had saved just enough to buy a train ticket far away. My bag was small, just a few clothes and a notebook, but my heart held something bigger: courage. I still remember the morning I left. The sun was rising, painting the sky in pink and gold. I walked quietly down the street, my shoes tapping softly on the pavement, afraid someone would stop me. But no one did. When I finally stepped onto that train, I felt a weight lift from my chest. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The ride was long and scary, but I kept staring out the window, telling myself, this is the first page of your new story. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew it couldn't be worse than what I had left behind. Starting over was hard. I worked small jobs, lived in small rooms, and ate simple meals. There were nights I cried from hunger, days I thought I couldn't keep going. But every hardship I faced felt different now. This time, I had chosen it. I wasn't trapped anymore. I was free, and even though freedom was tough, it was worth everything. Little by little, I began to heal. I learned to smile again, not fake smiles for the world, but real ones that came from my heart. I learned to trust people who proved they deserved it. Slowly, I began to believe in myself. It wasn't an easy road, but it was mine. For the first time, that was enough. Now, when I look back at that young girl I once was, the 13-year-old who felt invisible, the 15-year-old who cried herself to sleep, and the 16-year-old who walked away with nothing but hope, I feel tears in my eyes. Not just from sadness, but from pride. That little girl didn't know it, but she was stronger than she ever imagined. She carried pain heavier than most adults could bear, but she never gave up. She built a life from the ashes. Because of her, I am who I am today. At 73, I can finally say this with peace: I survived. My dear ones, if you are listening to me now, remember this: sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you. That is a pain no child should ever face. But your pain does not define you. What defines you is how you rise from it. If you carry wounds that no one sees, hold on. If you cry in silence, believe me, you are not weak. You are building strength that will carry you through. One day, like me, you will look back and realize you were braver than you ever thought. Family is not always made up of the people you are born to. Family is made up of the ones who love you, protect you, and stand by you. And even if you have to build that family yourself, it is possible. I am Grandma Lou, and this is my story. A story of sadness, yes. But more than that, a story of overcoming.